Hey there, welcome to another edition of Common Knowledge, the show where I take a look at 10 common Magic the Gathering cards, and I'll tell you if they're any good in the Pauper format or not. I am exhausted. Not by any card stuff, but by all the yard work I did today. Anyway, let's look at some cards while I'm still awake. Memory Lapse. I love this card. Not necessarily for Pauper, but I do love this card generally. Let's talk about it. Memory Lapse is 1 and a blue for an instant counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, put it on top of its owner's library instead of putting it into that player's graveyard. Banned in Historic. I wonder why. Interesting. This card has some really cool printings. This one's pretty cool. I like that one. This guy's a classic, the 7th edition art. But it's I mean you gotta look at some of these bangers here. I love the original. Well, I guess there's 2 original ones. I love both of these. The puzzle pieces in the head are great. This guy getting parts of his brain, I guess it's like a statue. Awesome. These Homelands versions are so cool. And then you got my girl over here, Rebecca, making a very sweet version as well. Memory Lapse is a cool card with a lot of good printings. And there's a Strixhaven one. That's kind of cool too. And then this is from the Dan Secret Lair. This card is I guess it's not that expensive, but it's a little bit more expensive than usual, I suppose. This is not a very good counterspell. Not in Pauper, not in most formats, but you do see a lot of copies of this fly off the shelves because, like that Dan Secret Lair, it's used in Dan. It's one of the big cards in Dan because Dan, or Forgetful Fish, whichever you call it, is a format where you have a shared library. And the idea of being able to counter one of your opponent's spells and then it goes back on the top of the library means that you might get to draw it the next turn for your draw step. And that can be really cool. In fact, this is one of my favorite cards to play in any sort of battle box, which is another shared deck format. And that's really cool to counter somebody's spell and then know that you're going to draw it the next turn. My battle box, I have a couple different battle boxes, but I have a battle box that's all about top card manipulation. So a lot of scrying, a lot of what cards am I kind of thinking of? There's some where you can rearrange the top 3 cards of your deck, like ponder kind of effects, I guess, and brainstorm stuff. And so it's a lot of top deck manipulation, and that's really cool. And Memory Lapse is a really great card for that as well. In the Pauper format, this is not particularly good. It's a counterspell, and it's easier to cast than counterspell. But knowing that it's just going to go back on the opponent's top of the opponent's library, in some ways is good. Like maybe in very specific instances, it could be a spell that is only useful for the opponent that one turn. And you put it back on the top of their library, so then the next turn they draw it, and now it's not useful to them anymore. So maybe you've not only countered them, you've tempo played them, and that can be extremely powerful. But more often than not, they're going to try casting some big spell, you want to counter it, and it goes right back on the top of their library, which means they'll just draw it next turn and try playing it again. And you're down a counter spell, and they're down kind of nothing. I mean, it is still tempo at that point. So it's not really a counter spell that's ever used in Pauper, to my recollection. I'm sure there's some other things that you can do in Pauper that can manipulate the top of the opponent's deck or make them mill or things like that. But for the most part, I just don't think this really has that much of a place in Pauper, which is fine because it has places in all sorts of other formats. I have not made a Dan deck myself, but like I said, I've made some battle boxes, and that's pretty cool. I've got a specific blue. I guess it is kind of a Dan deck, although it doesn't have any creatures in it. I'll have to talk about that maybe on a separate video because that's not a Pauper thing. But I have a mono blue deck that's all about trying to make the opponent draw out. But it's a shared deck list, so you can potentially screw yourself. It's really cool. Anyway, for the Pauper format, this can't get much more than like a 3, I guess. I mean, it is a counter spell, so I want to give it some props. but it's not even a mana leak. Mana leak would be way higher than this. We've done mana leak before. I can't remember what I gave it, but it was probably pretty close to a 5, even though it's not. It's also not played in the Pauper format, but it is a better counterspell than this. What is our next card? Burner Rocket is 1 and a red for a 3/1 vehicle. It's also an artifact. It's got flash. When this vehicle enters, target creature you control gets +2/+0 and gains trample until end of turn, and it has a crew cost of 1. This is kind of cool. I know it's from Ether Drift. We're not supposed to like Ether Drift, but Ether Drift had some cool cards. And I think there's something kind of interesting here. Being a flash artifact means that this is kind of just a combat trick. I do like that this is a combat trick in that way. It's got instant speed here, and like a lot of other red instant speed spells, this pumps some power. This one gives trample, and I think that's okay. Like those are pretty cool. But you also just get an artifact on the table that you can then later crew and have a 3/1. So maybe it can crash in for a little bit more extra damage at some point, or trade with like chump, or trade, or do lots of things. So I don't mind any of those things. It's a similar kind of thought when you're talking about something like Melded Moxite. There's all sorts of those red discard 1, draw 2 spells. And Moxite, which is from the Edge of Eternity's set, that is an artifact that says when it enters, you discard a card and draw 2. But it's still an artifact that's on the table. So unlike all those other ones that are instant or sorcery speed spells, this one is an artifact that stays on the table, and that might matter to you if you're playing something like Affinity, or if you're playing something like some of those new Marvel cards that care about artifacts entering the battlefield, whether they're pinging the opponents or putting +1/+1 counters on guys. This is cool. This is a cool guy that you might consider putting in one of those decks as a combat trick that is also an artifact and works towards your artifact count. I've been thinking about that specific deck, this kind of Rakdos, potentially, like, it's kind of weird to say a blueless Affinity deck because blue is so good with Affinity, but maybe like a Rakdos Marvel led Affinity style deck or artifact heavy deck, and this could be a cool little combat trick within it. So I don't hate it, especially a crew 1. You're tapping down a 1/1 guy and then getting a 3/1 guy out of it. That's kind of cool. I'm going to give this a halfway decent score. It probably doesn't see any real play, but I think you could surprise somebody. And it also has the distinct honor of being a complete green across the board. You can play this in any format, which is cool. That's always fun too. We'll go for I'm going to go for like a 2.9, which is probably way higher than it deserves. But I think from everything that I laid out, you can understand why I might come to that conclusion. I think that's nice. Lotus Eye Mystics is 3 and a white for a 3/2 human monk. It's got prowess. So whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And when this creature enters, you return target enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. So it's kind of an Auramancer, but it also has prowess. Let's take a look at Auramancer. Auramancer is 3 mana. Yeah, and it's also, my girl, Rebecca, made this one. So I just, like Auramancer, which is playable in Pauper, or legal in Pauper. I don't know if it's playable in Pauper. We'll have to get to it someday. But Auramancer, 3 mana, you're getting a 2/2. And then this is, you're getting a 3/2 with prowess. But now you're paying an extra mana for it. Is that worth it? I don't know that it is. I really want my prowess guys to be cheaper. The higher cost of a prowess guy, the more likely it is that you're not going to have enough cards to proc the prowess on subsequent turns. And I don't like that. Although this one kind of does guarantee you don't have, or the guarantee that you do have a non-creature spell in your hand, because it can grab an enchantment back. Now, there are enchantment creatures that you could grab back too, and those wouldn't work. But if you're grabbing back an actual enchantment and then playing it, then this thing gets the prowess trigger too, which is kind of cool. So you could do something like a Orzhov deck, Hopeless Nightmare on 1, crack the Hopeless Nightmare or bargain it away, whichever you prefer, and put that in the graveyard, and then you throw this guy out, and you can get that Hopeless Nightmare back that you can play the next turn. Yeah, there's something kind of there. 4 mana is still very expensive. I don't think I would pay 4 mana for this, but you can't make it 3 mana because Oromancer, right? You don't want to make something that's way better than Oromancer at the same mana cost. So would I play this over Oromancer? I don't think so. I think I'd still just prefer the Oromancer at that point, getting it on the table and then being able to, ephemerate it or something, and being able to get back other enchantments if I needed to. And I wouldn't necessarily want to do that with this guy, because if you ephemerate this guy, you're kind of losing out on one of your prowess triggers. I think we can go for 2.7. I feel like everything's kind of in that mode. But these have all been better than average cards. Not a whole lot better than average, but better than average. What's our next one? Stand United, which is 1 in a Selesnya hybrid, so a green or a white. For an instant, target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If it's an ally, you scry 2. This is from the Avatar Eternal set. And it's an okay combat trick. We've talked about allies in the past. In fact, we talked about allies maybe only a short handful of episodes ago. And I don't think allies are quite there in the Pauper format. We don't have enough of them that really allows that deck to break containment. But this isn't a terrible spell to add in that deck. I think it's a pretty terrible spell otherwise, because if you don't have an ally, if you have like a changeling or something, that works. But if you don't have a changeling or an ally, then this is just a worse giant growth that you're paying double the mana for, and you don't want that. But if you do have the ally, the Scry 2 is not terrible. I'd take a Scry 2. Too narrow though, and narrow in the way that the deck that would want it isn't a real deck yet, and I don't think it's going to be a deck anytime soon. If Avatar, because Avatar was very ally heavy, but if Avatar didn't make allies into a real deck, that means we have to wait for more allies, and I have no idea when we would get more allies. I bet it's going to be a while since we just got these allies, or because Avatar is still fresh, it is in standard. This is not in standard because it's part of the Eternal set, but allies are a thing in standard right now. It is possible that we will get more allies in the next couple sets, just as a way of, continuing to contribute to the standard format that is out there. Where would they come from? It doesn't sound like they're going to be coming from Reality Fracture. It's definitely not coming from Hobbit. Star Trek, maybe? Can you have allies in Star Trek? I don't think you'd have allies in Star Trek, and I think we'd probably know about it. We've seen some Star Trek spoilers, some very light ones, but I don't think that's going to be there either. So we kind of have to wait for whatever comes next year for more allies, and I'm just not sure that we're going to see more allies. And if we don't, this card is not particularly useful in Pauper. So I think we can go for a 2. I'm just going to go for a straight 2, actually. 2.0 on that one. If Allies was a deck, I'd pump it up a little bit more, but probably not a whole lot more. Scholar of Combustion is 3 and a red for a 3/2 human wizard. When this creature enters, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. You may cast that card until the end of your next turn. You have to still pay its costs, and the timing rules still apply. So if you exile a sorcery, you can't play it at instant speed. Not really good, because let me show you this little baby. Ardent Elementalist exists, and when it shows up here, Ardent Elementalist is the same mana cost, but it just returns an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And I'd much rather have it come back to my hand, because then I have it whenever I need it. I can play it that turn, I can play it the next turn, I can play it the turn after that. I guess if you need spells or need cards exiled out of your graveyard, which we kind of have that deck now. Spirit Mascot from Secret to Strixhaven brought that in. This card being able to come in and exile those spells, and then you can play those spells, and they go back to your graveyard, and then potentially you ephemerate this guy, and now he's able to. You could do kind of an Auramancer, or not an Auramancer, an Archaeomancer. You can do an Archaeomancer. You can do an Ardent Elementalist idea with this. I think you'd still rather just play the Ardent Elementalist. Now, important point. This is a 3/2. The Elementalist is a 2/1. This is a better body on the table, whether it's for attacking or for blocking. But generally, I think you're just going to prefer to have the Elementalist that's able to put it back in your hand rather than having to exile it. I could see somebody trying this instead of the Elementalist and just seeing how it works, especially in that Spirit Mascot kind of deck where cards leaving your graveyard is. Well, I guess they both leave your graveyard. Like that's not. I guess that's not special to that deck. But I could see somebody trying a couple copies of this and seeing how it feels. Maybe it feels good to have that extra point of power and toughness. It's possible. But the decks that I run a deck, I had a deck with Ardent Elementalist in it, and I kind of liked it. Most of the time, you're going to see Archaeomancer get played instead, because most of the spells you want to bring back are going to be blue, but red can do it sometimes. This is okay. This is okay. I'm not going to give it a 5 or anything like that, but I think I could give this thing a 4.2 and feel pretty solid about it. Interesting card. Goblin Turncoat. 1 and a black for a 2/1 Goblin Mercenary. You can sacrifice a goblin to regenerate this creature. Fun to see a goblin that's in black. We do have some fully black goblins. I mean, Lorwyn had the Boggarts, which were black and red, so you sometimes had some mono black goblins. There's this one's from Legions. I remember there's also the Onslaught one, which is the Festering Goblin, right? It's the zombie goblin. Festering Goblin. There's my boy from Onslaught. Yes, from Onslaught. Hey, look at me knowing magic cards. Goblin Turncoat is not great. The idea here that you have to be able to sacrifice goblins makes it pretty narrow. The fact that it's in red makes it, or the fact that it's in black makes it very narrow, because even the goblin decks now have to splash black if you want to play this guy. And I don't think this guy is good enough to splash black for in those decks. I would much rather have, what is it, the Goblin Sledder? Yeah, Goblin Sledder that sacks goblins, but it gives creature +1/+1. That is giving you the reach to get further in and do more damage. This guy, I mean, I guess he could block for most of the game, or attack in and maybe even trade with some opponents, but I don't really want to spend 2 mana on a 2/1 that sometimes lives. I think this is kind of bad, honestly, and I'm going to give it a kind of bad score of a 1.8. Regenerating's good. Like you can certainly keep this on the table a lot, maybe make a lot of goblin tokens and make sure that it stays on the table and blocks forever, but outside of that, just it doesn't do a heck of a lot. Plated Sea Strider is double blue for a 1/4 beast. That's all it is, and that's all it ever will be. From Scars of Mirrodin. It did have a distinctly Mirrodin look, so that makes a lot of sense. And then got reprinted in Conspiracy, because sure, we need a we need a 2 mana 1/4. I guess we'll grab one here. Bad, obviously. 1/4 is, I don't know. I mean, you gotta ask yourself the question, and this is a stupid question because you don't need to care about this either. I gotta spell turtle right. That's what. What's my problem? Aegis Turtle, single blue mana, 0/5. This thing blocks way better. This thing blocks way better than a 1/4, and it's still not a good card. I'm not saying you should go out and buy 4 copies of Aegis Turtle, but the 1/4, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it blocks a goblin or blocks something on the ground. Blocks a Voltaren Epicure, I suppose, is more specific. Okay, but it doesn't. It would need 6. It really needs 6 toughness to be able to block the important creatures out there, and this doesn't do that. And otherwise, it's just vanilla, and that's not good. This is, I would say this. It's not much worse than a grizzly bear, but I think it is a little worse than a grizzly bear. I'll give this a 1.9. Rocksteady Crash Courser, 4 and double green for a 7/7 legendary Rhino Mutant. Rocksteady can't be blocked by more than one creature, and boars you control can't be blocked by more than one creature. But he's a rhino, but he works with Bebop, which is the other one from this set, and they both work with each other. He also has forest cycling too. So this is in conversation with some other similar big green cards. Obviously the boy, the original, the greatest, Colossal Dreadmaw, as a 6 mana 6/6 with trample. You can choose, whether the extra point of power and toughness and only being able to be blocked by one creature, is that better than trample? Probably not. But we also have just gotten better Colossal Dreadmaws over the years. Maybe this is a bit of a side grade to it, but one of the upgrades to Colossal Dreadmaw is the Balam T-Rexar, which is a Colossal Dreadmaw. Same mana cost, same power and toughness, still trample. But now when it enters, you gain 3 life, and it has that forest cycling too, which is very similar to Rocksteady. So now which one do you want? Do you want the Balam T-Rexar, which has the trample, which might be more useful than this, but it loses out on the power of the extra point of power and toughness? That's a good question. Also, I guess important to note is let's take a look at the Bebop here, which is the Warthog Warrior. It has Menace, and then Rhinos you control have Menace, and it has Swamp Cycling. So the idea is, if you got both this Bebop and this Rocksteady out, one says it can't be blocked by more than one creature, the other one says it can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, so then they're both unblockable. Hey, that's a fun synergy that they have. No. It's kind of cool saying that there are boars. You potentially have other boars in your decks, probably just changelings, but we can take a very quick look and see about boar creatures in the Pauper format. Dirkwood boars, right? Is that a common card? Pretty sure that's a common card. Let's see, anything that's useful here. A 4 mana 3/3. No, thank you. 3/2 with Intimidate. That's interesting. Really hard to block at that point. When you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on this guy. Yeah, sure. I mean, there's lots of boars. There's the Dirkwood boars, the classic 5 mana 4/4. Oh, Curious Farm Animals. That's an interesting one as a card that is potentially used in the Pauper format as a naturalized kind of effect. But nothing here that we really see that is super Pauper playable. Hog Monkey, I think, is a fun card from Avatar. Ironhoof Boar is kind of fun with the channel ability. That can be kind of cool. Croson Tusker is a favorite of mine, an old classic favorite of mine. The cycling that lets you find a basic land too, which is cool. Pygmy Razorback is a terrible card, but it is one that I think has great art. Yeah, there's some stuff here. Oh, Warp Tusker, sure. If you want to go into like more of a, maybe you could make a weird Monstertron deck that doesn't have any of the good Monstertron cards, but you could put that stuff in there. There are not very many good. Oh, actually, hang on. One last one. The Truffle Snout. That one's not really played in Pauper either, but it could get some counters or gain you some life. Okay. There's not really any useful boars in the Pauper format. So this is not all that useful. It's still a 6 mana 7/7, and it can forest cycle early in the game. But we've also talked about forest cyclers or any of these basic land cyclers, or not basic land cyclers, the land type cyclers that if you don't cycle for one, you're just left in the dust. You'd play a Generous Scent over this 10 times out of 10. So, score-wise, we got to go for something like a 3.4. Yeah, I think a 3.4. I mean, it's a decent card. You shouldn't be embarrassed by playing this, but you are choosing a worse option available to you at that point. What do we got next? Scroll of Avacyn, single mana for an artifact. You can pay 1 and sacrifice this artifact, draw a card if you control an angel, you sacrifice this artifact and you draw a card. If you control an angel, you also gain 5 life. I have seen this card played. There's somebody in one of the discords that I'm in, one of the Pauper discords, that has an angels list, and angels is not maybe the most strongest thing in Pauper, but he makes it work, and he's got some cool ideas in it. And this is one of the cool ideas. You can play the land that gains you life when an angel enters. This card will also gain you a good amount of life, and it just basically cycles for 2, which is cool. So I mean, if you cycle for 2 and gain 5 life, that's an okay card. And there's a decent amount of angels at basically every mana value at this point in Pauper. They're not incredibly great cards, but there's 1 mana angels that you might not be embarrassed playing. Let's go with Angel, and we'll say legal in Pauper, and we'll say mana value is equal to 1. There's one that's there's one. There is just one, but it's a fourth of a Sarah Angel, and it's only a single mana. I don't think that's bad. And plus, there are changelings and other things that you can do too. So there are enough angels that make it work. One of the cards that I really like. Let's get back to here first. But the Inspiring Overseer, Angel Cleric, and you draw a card, gain a life, 2/1 flyer for 3. You can do some blinky shenanigans with that. There's stuff. There are things out there that allow for an Angels deck, and I've seen it work. It's probably not the best deck in the format, but I've seen it work, and this is a card that is pretty integral to that, gaining a lot of life. Like, this is, you're playing against a red deck, and you're going to feel okay, because you can get this down very early, gain a substantial amount of life. That's 5 life, so a good amount of life, and draw a card off it, so replaces itself. It's cool. It's a cool card. I'll give it a 4.2. Only gets played in the one deck, and the one deck is not really a real deck, but and also has room to grow. If we do get more angels, there are some angel synergies out there, and we could potentially see that become a deck at some point. Ice Over is 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura. Enchant an artifact or creature. Enchanted permanent doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. We saw something basically just like this, and we said it was fine, I guess, but we just have better cards than this. The one that seems obvious to me is Blossom Bind. Now, this says enchant artifact or creature, so that's nice that you can stop an artifact too, which Blossom Bind doesn't do, but Blossom Bind does tap the creature, which is important. This does not tap the creature, so you have to play it on something that is tapped, or artifact that's also tapped. This taps when it comes into play, and it can't become untapped, and it can't have counters put on it, which is a different, an important note here. It says can't become untapped. Not just doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So if your opponent has some way of untapping creatures, doesn't matter. It matters here. You can still do that and get around it. Doesn't matter here. Creature can't be untapped. I don't care what you got. It doesn't happen at the untap step. It doesn't happen at any step. It doesn't happen for any ability. Just can't be untapped. And that's cool. Blossom Mind's a cool card. It sees some play. Ice Over is nothing. Doesn't see any play at all, and shouldn't. Well, let's go for a 2.1. I mean, it's still a removal spell of a kind, but not a particularly good one. Let's do a bonus card and then get out of here. Plague Rats, 2 and a black. We've done Plague Rats. In fact, we did Plague Rats pretty recently, but Plague Rats is fun. Yeah, Plague Rats is fun. I talked about another guy who had kind of a Dan deck that was just all Plague Rats, which is Cool. I think that's a cool idea. But the card itself, not useful for our purposes, since we've done it before. Mind Extraction, 2 and a black for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a creature. Target player reveals their hand and discards all cards of each of the sacrificed creature's colors. That's kind of cool. Kind of cool. If you can find a way to have a creature that's all colors that doesn't cost you 5 mana, it's possible. There are cards out there that can do that kind of thing, or you're able to give it all colors temporarily, and then you sack it to Mind Extraction and make your opponent discard everything that's not a colorless card or a land, which are inherently colorless. That could be kind of cool. You could maybe work something up that way. It does require a lot of foreknowledge, a lot of setup, and you're not going to have that opportunity most of the time. And when you don't get that opportunity, you need to then be playing the opponent's colors. Like if you don't have something that's all colors, then you have to be playing the same color as the opponent. You're playing a black deck, obviously, because this is a black card. Maybe you're splashing other colors or splashing black here and playing other colors, but you're definitely playing black. Is your opponent playing black? If they're not playing black, that's already one color that you're down. So you really sideboard card maybe, but also probably not, because it's a weird color hoser. And it's a very specific color hoser, and unless you can find a way to get a creature with all colors easily, which I don't think we have in Pauper. I mean, there's certainly ways of doing it in Standard right now, and other formats can also get creatures of all colors, but I don't think the Pauper format has a useful card that does that. There is a way of searching that. Let's see if I can say, yeah, I can just say all colors here, and it has to be exactly these colors. And I say legal in Pauper. Do we think there is one? That there's a golem from original Ravnica that's all colors, but I don't think it's common. And I also think it costs 5 mana. Yeah, there are no cards that are Wooburg to begin with in Pauper. There are probably some cards that will say, hey, this thing gains all colors, but that's a very narrow card that is not useful in basically any situation that you're not using Mind Extraction. We have other cards that do a similar kind of thing to Mind Extraction. It's Spinning Darkness, I believe. Not a card I've ever played, but I've had played on me before. Spinning Darkness, you can remove the top 3 black cards from your graveyard instead of paying Spinning Darkness mana cost. It deals 3. Nope, that's not what I was thinking of. I don't know what the card I'm thinking of then is. If you know or remember, put it in the comments. But there is something that is makes the opponent discard. Like you choose a color or you exile a card and then something like that. But then the opponent has to discard all the cards of a single color. And that can make them discard a bunch of cards. And that's kind of cool. And that does see a little play in Pauper. But Mind Extraction, nah. And until we do get some easy 5-color guys that probably don't cost Wooburg, and if you're making a Wooburg card, you're probably not putting it at common rarity. I think it's too high of a barrier to entry for this format. So I wouldn't worry about Mind Extraction. Fun idea of card, but not all that great. We can go ahead and give this thing I'll give it a 2.2 for fun, but that's about it. Thanks for joining me on this one. We'll catch you on the next one. See ya.